Alright, so we're in the GPT review problem set, and we come in here, and again, it's a matter of replacing the anywhere I have an ASCII X or hex 58. And actually, in the questions, I didn't actually have you replace all of them, but we'll walk through this. We start in the MBR, and this one only has one place where it took out the information, and that is the number of sectors in the partition. And again, this is always pretty straightforward. This is always going to be an FF, 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 FF. Okay. So you probably had enough of that in MBR to recognize that. Okay. When we come down to the header, okay, and so starting at offset 40, we have our hex 58s. So these 8 bytes, and again, if you look at your table on page 90, offset 40, you're going to see this is the first sector for the partition. So where not where the partition table starts, but where does the actual partitions, again, think of a book. We've got the table of contents. That's like the partition table telling you where everything is. But where does chapter 1 actually begin? Okay, chapter 1 is always going to begin on sector 34, okay, in a Microsoft world, okay, which decimal 34 is 22 hex. Just prove that to you. Decimal 34 equals 22 hex. So I would write 220000. Okay. Now the next bit of information that it's asking for, again, I'm following on the table on page 90, so at offset 48 is the last sector for partitions. Okay. How do we figure that out? Okay. We know how many sectors are in the drive. Okay. So we're going to take this number minus 34. And how do I get at that? Okay, the last sector has the backup header. The 32 sectors before that are the backup of our partition table. So 34 sectors back is the end of, like, the last usable page out of our book. Okay, so if I just take this value and subtract 34 from it, I will get our value. Now, I don't believe that's even asked. Let me just double check that. I don't think it's even asked. Oh, it is. So, sorry. So if I take this number minus 34, I end up with 2096606. That's the last usable sector. Okay. So again, I have to convert that. So 2096606. I end up with 1F FD DE. Again, that's only 3 bytes, so I have to pad with 00, and then I'm going to write it in little endian. So I'm going to just making note of this. And we'll come back into HXD and write DE FD 1F00. And you see it's similar to this value here. This is the location of the backup. If I'm subtracting 34 sectors from that, I end up with D. Instead of FF, it's DE FD 1F. And then pad the rest with zeros. So that's what's missing in the header. Now I come down to sector 2, the actual partition table. And question 21 is, what is the partition type for the first? So this is a type GUID. This is a Microsoft reserved, and you can read that Microsoft reserved partitions always have the same type GUID, and you can find that in the appendix. There's a table, or again, if you want to look on page 93, you know, it's showing you the physical sectors in the partition table, and you can see that the very first row. It's in yellow, but it's the very first row of that table. You'll see 16, E3, C9, E3, 5C, 0B. That first line is what you would put in there. Again, reverse it, put it in the proper notation, but that is the type GUID there. And then the next set of questions, basically from 22, I think all the way down, are just basically at 22 through 31. It's just starting and ending sectors for each of the partitions. Okay. So again, we have a repeating pattern here. You have 128 bytes, 128 bytes. Okay. So you always start off, again, GUID value, and then 8 bytes for the starting sector, 8 bytes for the ending sector. Okay, so we're going to repeat that pattern. So third line down into the partition entry is a starting sector. So we sweep those, you end up with 34. Next 8 bytes we sweep, that's the ending sector. We're going to come down to, here's the GUID, type GUID, and from now on the type GUID's always going to start with A2, A0, D0, and you will see that repeating, A2, A0, D0, A2, A0, D0, A2, so forth. So each one of those partitions is always going to start with that value. So if I go down 2 rows from that, there's my starting sector. So there's the starting sector for partition 2, there's the ending. I got my A2, A0, D0, I'll go down 2 lines. There's my starting sector for partition 3. Now here, partition 3, I don't know the ending. Okay. But I go down to partition 4. Again, there's my A2, A0, D0. Go down 2 lines. There's my starting sector. Okay. The ending sector of partition 3 is always going to be 1 less than the starting sector of partition 4. Okay. Again, think about chapters in your book. If partition 3 ended on page 300, the beginning of chapter 4 is going to be 301. So if I know the beginning of chapter 4, or partition 4 here, is 526, 464. I just subtract 1, and that gives me the ending sector for partition 3. So I can fill in that value. In this case, again, I'm going to go back. Beginning sector for partition 4 is 526, 464. My ending sector for partition 3 is going to be 526, 463, 1 less than that. So you can figure out, again, we won't go through every single one of these, but that's your pattern. If you have starting and ending of one partition, you know the starting of the next partition because it's one sector after that. Okay. And so you can figure that out. Okay. When we get to the 6th partition, it's asking for the unique GUID. So here's something different. What's the unique GUID? Well, again, we're going to go to the backup partition table for that. That's the only place you would be able to get that. You can't discern it in any way because this is a serial number. So 2096 for, oh, sorry, 2096-607 will take me to the backup. 33 sectors from the total. Okay, and you'll see here's my Microsoft Reserve. So the sixth partition, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there is a unique partition GUID, the serial number for it. Okay, so the proper notation would be D4 A1 7671, 4B26 4734, A1 18 8102 2E 4C 3076. And then you're just finishing out starting and ending sectors for the remaining partitions. Okay, and that's how we solve this problem.